Just a reminder, we're going to begin here in a minute or two. If anybody has communication forms that need, if you wish to speak, please turn those in before we start the meeting. Thank you. Forms are located in the table over there.
You end up seeing actually daily.
I'll be on it. I hope we're all. I got one. Let's go. Tell them I'll be back by 7.
Okay, we'll call the board education meeting for the Menomonie School District. Meeting has been properly noticed. At this time, I'll again take roll call.
Mark Hillman.
Here.
Tanya Ducey. Here. Cliff Moses. Here. Carl Palmer.
Here.
Amy Riddle Swanson. Here. Bradley Schneider.
Here.
Angie Smith.
Here.
David Smith.
Here. Thank you. We have a quorum. Cliff Moses, I will note, is joining by phone. At this time, let's stand for the pledge of allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The school district of the Menomonie area, by embracing the unique needs and using the strengths of our diverse community, is dedicated to preparing all students to become lifelong learners, caring individuals, and responsible citizens. Okay, at this time, we'll move into the communication portion of our meeting. I have 17 right now. We also have a bunch of them that were submitted email prior to the meeting. I guess I would entertain a motion by the board to have the ones that were submitted by email entered into the record. They'll be available on board docs anyway, but just for the length of time.
I suppose.
Motion, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any discussion?
Okay, maybe just a reminder would be in order for those online that where they can go to read them if they'd like.
Joe?
Yes, anybody can go to the school district website, and the board docs program under district information has all of the meetings, comments received that were requested for the board meeting have been uploaded into the public portion of that software system. So it's board docs on the school district website.
Again, we have 17 that would like to speak here tonight. We had, last I knew, Jan, I think there were 7. Was it more than that?
There's
15 online. So that were submitted. So if you'd like to see those comments, they'll be in board docs under this meeting. Okay. For communications, comments of the people of the school district of the Menomonie area are encouraged and appreciated by the board administrators. Education is a partnership with the schools, parents, and taxpayers, all being important participants. Members of the public are welcome to provide comments to the board during this portion of the meeting. This is the time to air concerns, express your opinion on the issues. There should be no negative personal attacks against any individuals, including staff, board members, or administrators. Indicate if you have a handout or if you would like the administration to respond to your concerns, please indicate that when you speak. And if you have any materials that you want presented or included in the information for tonight's meeting, please put those into Janet or Joe or myself. Okay, reminder. Each participant will have 3 minutes. The way our rules are set up, the first 30 minutes will go a maximum of 3 minutes per person. After that, the board has the option to either continue as we are or to cut it down to 2 minutes for the speakers after the 30-minute time frame. So we kind of play it by ear. I will strictly enforce the 3-minute rule tonight just because of the number of speakers that we have. Okay. And I'm going to call on people in the order that they were received. We'll start with Nancy, Moynihan. Sorry, please state your name, address.
My name is Nancy Moynihan. My address is P.O. Box 845, Menomonie, Wisconsin. And thank you so much for letting me speak.
All speakers are encouraged to sit at the table. Make sure, tell everybody else. Make sure the mic is on and speak into the mic. Thank you.
Testing. Well, as everybody I'm sure is, I'm COVID weary, and I'm really disappointed that this is even being discussed anymore. It's been a long time. And I did make a mistake on my handout. I forgot the word from, so I printed it in there. So I think we all know what a coronavirus is. It's a flu, it's a common cold. And through gain of function, it's been morphed into many diseases over time, and we are now to the COVID-19 variety. So per the CDC, we wear masks because we're supposed to protect the people around us from COVID. That was sourced from the CDC website. You can look it up. It's said to be a health risk. Therefore, the masks are being used as part of a health agenda. I believe that's the case. PCR tests are being used to decide whether someone has COVID. They have been proven to be false, by the way, and I've got evidence of that. It's not a viable test for virus detection per Dr. Kerry Mullis, the inventor of the test. He was a longtime critic of Dr. Fauci, and unfortunately he died right before COVID-19 hit. So another scientist, Dr. David Rasnick, said, "I'm skeptical that a PCR test is ever true. It's a great scientific research tool. It's a horrible tool for clinical medicine." The sources are on the bottom of these pages. I'm making this brief so I can stay within my 3 minutes, but it's there for you to look at. And there's plenty of information. Of course, I use DuckDuckGo, I don't use Google, and I don't consider fact checkers to be a valid source of information. So PCR tests are now going to be discontinued because they've been proven to be false. But they're not taking them off the market till January 1st, 2022. So why is that? They're false. They don't prove, they were not created to be a diagnostic test to see if someone had a virus. Dr. Kerry Mullis, you can go on YouTube, he's got lots of videos. He can explain it way better than I. So the PCR tests, and on the third page of the handouts, are being discontinued due to the test being fraudulently used to increase COVID case numbers. There is no evidence of asymptomatic spread. I asked many doctors last year to provide me with articles indicating that there was proof of an asymptomatic spread. No one could do it. They sent me articles about droplets. Well, so there's articles now that prove there's no asymptomatic spread. If there's no asymptomatic spread, why are we even thinking about masking anybody? So there's no need to wear the masks. They were meant to protect people from droplets that may cause asymptomatic spread. This source is from PrincipiaScientific.com.
Okay, Thank you, Nancy. It goes very fast.
Can I have anybody else's time just to finish? This is
No,
really important.
I'm sorry.
What? No.
We're all on the same page.
Okay, you said I can have some of his and he's
No,
next.
I'm sorry, you have 3 minutes, I'm sorry.
You wanna finish reading this?
Okay, our next speaker.
I'm gonna just finish before, because there's no isolation of the COVID virus. And there is evidence that the city of Alberta, Canada canceled all of their mandates because they cannot isolate the COVID virus. So I'm asking for you to stop this conversation until you can isolate the COVID virus. Have your attorney look at the website, look at the information I provided. There's an article and a video. And then just go forward without mask mandates. Thanks so much. It's all in the packet.
Just a reminder, they have 30 minutes, and then we get that down to 2. So the quicker we get to the speakers, the better for everybody. I will hold my phone up at the 30-second mark, okay? To give you a cue, the time is running short. Our next speaker, Dr. Bruce Trimble. Bruce? Please state your name and address.
Point across the microphone. I'm Dr. Bruce Trimble, that's a dentist, not a memory. And,
Can't hear you.
Lean right into the mic. You almost gotta.
okay, is that better?
Yes.
Okay. I'm Dr. Bruce Trimble. I'm a dentist, not an MD, retired. Senior, I guess I should say, because the other one is not my father, he's my son. Anyway, I'm here to speak totally opposed to making school kids wear masks. They are more harmful than they are good. And that's been proven scientifically, it's been proven by the research and the statistics. School kids are not a problem, but the masks are. If you would take that mask that you're wearing and wear it all day and have it tested, you would not like to find out what's inside of that mask that you're breathing through all day. One of the men who has been in this field for 30 years said that a bacteria can go right through the cloth masks that we wear. And a bacteria is 400 times larger than a virus. So using a cloth mask to stop virus, he said, was about the same as using a chain link fence to keep mosquitoes out. In other words, it's useless. It does make some politicians happy to see us wearing masks. But if you will check with the scientists who are not obligated to politicians, you'll find that they are of no use, especially with young children. And the damage that it does to a kid to make him wear a mask is far exceeding that it.
No, 30 seconds.
Okay. The damage due to wearing a mask for a kid far exceeds the benefit that it might have gotten. So check with the people who are not obligated to politicians and get the real answer. Thank you.
Will be Gretchen Monte. Please state your name and your address. And I'd ask the audience to please be respectful. I know this is a highly emotionally charged deal, but, let's all try to get through it. Gretchen?
Thank you. I'm Gretchen Yacko. I live on 13th Street in Menomonie, and I have 2 children in the school district right now. Since the email I sent to board members less than 2 weeks ago, the landscape has changed very rapidly. At this point, this shouldn't be a difficult decision for the board to make, even though some people will disagree, as they always disagree about whatever you choose to do. All counties in Wisconsin are now at high levels of transmission, and then county emergency department visits are also high. This is before school starts and before the Scout students return to town. The CDC just stated clearly, quote, due to the circulating and highly contagious Delta variant, CDC recommends universal indoor masking by all students age 2 and older, staff, teachers, and visitors to K-12 schools, regardless of vaccination status. This is supported by the Department of Health in Wisconsin, the Wisconsin Education Association, and the American Academy of Pediatrics, and in my opinion, common sense. But I'm here to talk about what is best for our children, and to be in school is best for our children. I think we can all agree that being in the building is the best educational environment. How do we make that happen safely for the most children? Everyone wears a mask, and those that can get vaccinated do that. If a family chooses to go maskless, they do have the virtual school option, which this district kindly provides. Masks are an educational tool. Do not take that away. This is about civic pride, American ideals of community, working together to keep fellow citizens and residents safe, showing our children what it means to work toward a common goal. With everyone masking, we can get back to the business of educating. We can once again include those folks in the dialogue that are excluded when it's not safe. I know many people who couldn't even come to this meeting because they have a toddler, or they are immune compromised, or they're in a group that can't risk an uncertain situation like this. Just like the survey that was put out, this is not a representative sample of our school district community for those reasons. Kids too are much better with certainty. Everyone wearing a mask is clear and a stable statement. The decision to require masks is one based on science, safety, and civic duty. Wearing masks in a group setting like public schools is right now the patriotic thing to do. It is the right thing to do. Thank you.
This time we're going to call on Fiona. Thank Fiona, state your name and address.
My name is Fiona Georgakopoulos. I live on 540th Street, and I am a student at the Menomonie Middle School. I think that masking should be required for everybody who wants to go basically to school next year, this upcoming year, because even if masks aren't perfect, like people have said and will say, if you can save one life, if you can save one child who wants to go to school, why would you not? Why would you sentence this child to death because you will not wear a mask? That is dramatic, yes, but it's true. People can die because you don't wear masks. They can. It's been scientifically proven. And if it's a personal belief that masks aren't helpful, then we have virtual school options. And if it's a matter of your right to not wear a mask, then think about the people who have compromised immune systems that are having their right to go to school safely taken away. I feel like the right to go to school for a child is a lot more important than your personal belief on whether or not you want to wear a mask. I took the virtual school option, and I will again next year if masks aren't required, because I don't want to put people at risk, or my family or myself at risk, because people aren't wearing masks. Everybody in my family who is able to be vaccinated is vaccinated, and we're still gonna wear masks because the vaccination, it is being shown to not completely eliminate cases of hospitalization and cases of COVID-19. So, yeah, that's all.
Okay, thank you, Phil. This time I'd like to call on Josie Tillman.
Hi, my name is Josie Pillman, and I live in Napa. And I am a member of the community. My grandchildren are children in it. I'm addressing a different issue. I'm talking about the gender support plan for students. The School Board of Menomonie is dedicated to helping our students become lifelong learners, caring individuals, and responsible citizens in a learning environment free from discrimination, harassment, and bullying, regardless of sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression, including transgender and gender non-conforming students, unquote. Caring individuals and responsible citizens are not involved in LGBTQ+ attitudes and behaviors. These behaviors are immoral and wrong. They need to be quickly corrected and nipped in the bud. Wrong is always wrong. If evil is allowed to prevail, the students involved will be emboldened to bully and harass their teachers and peers. This is what we already see happening. Boys having girls walk into the privacy of their bathroom is truly harassment. Following the logic, why are thieves and liars discriminated against? Why are they not given protection from bullying? Do you have a bully-free zone for liars and thieves? Is their particular wrong also protected? Do you allow students to walk into the office and steal a stapler or to cheat on their exams because that is who they are? Do you affirm them? Points of action. The gender support plan for students needs to be completely discarded before the next school year begins. In its place, we need to instruct our teachers and students how to kindly and appropriately correct gender-confused peers. Educate the educators. 2, students must use bathrooms and locker rooms of their biological birth. Wandering into the wrong facility should invoke discipline and counsel. Use clergy if necessary. And Dr. Zygowski needs to hire teachers and staff of character. Teachers and staff need to be properly vetted to be people of high moral standards and character who know how to kindly and courageously stand up and speak out against wrong. They should also know how to defend the speech and rights of students who desire to help their peers avoid the pitfalls of an immoral lifestyle. And many of these are immoral. If I walk by your house and don't approve of your window dressings, I may just need to keep my opinion to myself. However, if I see flames pouring from your upstairs window at 2 a.m., out of love for you, I may need to pound on your door to wake you up, even if it offends you. It may save your life. The community of Menomonie is pounding on the door of the LGBTQ+ crowd in our Menomonie schools. It is 2 a.m. and we see flames.
This time I'd like to call on Alexander Hall. Quiet, please. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Alexander Hall. I live at 1108 Elmwood West in Menomonie. This evening, I'm asking the board to follow the recommendations of the CDC, the American Academy of Pediatrics, Wisconsin DHS, and DPI by requiring masks for all students, staff, and visitors in our K-12 schools regardless of vaccination status. This takes courage. This also takes humility to admit that you cannot be as knowledgeable about public health, epidemiology, and infectious disease as those experts who have spent years to decades of their lives studying them. It also takes trust that they have a full understanding of the issue and truly have the best interest of students in mind. That trust has been earned. Last year, our district largely followed CDC guidance, Despite many cases in our community, we had overall relatively few instances of known transmission within the schools. Our schools were fairly safe for all students, including those with compromised immune systems or who are otherwise medically vulnerable. We did have many exclusions due to both illness and quarantine, but most students were able to be in school for in-person learning the vast majority of the year. Now, we have Delta variant, which is 2 to 4 times as contagious as last fall's virus. Southern states are now having the highest rates of COVID they've had since the pandemic began, and many of their hospitals are overwhelmed. It's now starting to cause a rapid surge in cases here in Wisconsin and the Chippewa Valley. And our hospitalizations are going up too. It's highly probable that we will have as many, if not more, cases this fall as last, even if we do use masks and distancing like last year. To decrease our mitigation measures in the face of this more contagious virus would be a recipe for widespread transmission, an excessive number of student exclusions, and potential school closure. Masks and distancing work. We should keep using these tools no matter how much we want this pandemic to be over already. It's likely that tonight we will hear the ideal of choice held up as an absolute virtue. While I myself am a huge proponent of personal choice when it comes to one's body and health, that does not hold true when your choice can harm the people around you. Not masking and therefore potentially spewing virus into other people's air is like smoking. If I smoke, it's my choice, but I am not permitted to smoke here in this room and expose you all to the harmful health effects. Choice is not a virtue when it can harm others. I do not like masks. They are uncomfortable and make communication difficult, which makes learning difficult. But they are an important and even more importantly, the experts think, a necessary tool to keep transmission down and keep our kids in school for in-person learning. Thank you.
Jennifer Strong.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Strong, and I live on Cedar Creek, Court, in Menomonie. I'm a family medicine doctor that's been practicing here in Menomonie for the last 10 years. I have 3 children that attend school in the SDMA and participate in a combination of 6 different sports. I've been struggling to decide what I wanted to say to you all, that the Academy of Pediatrics, the CDC, and various other professional organizations haven't already said about the importance of masking and vaccinating our children. So I decided to take a little bit of a different approach. I will start by sharing with you my personal experience with COVID. My 15-year-old son got COVID in November that caused mild headache, loss of taste, smell, nothing too scary. I was concerned when he felt winded going up a flight of stairs, and even more concerned when he mentioned squeezing chest pain after a run in December. I had him get checked the next day, and his troponin, a heart muscle enzyme, came back at 20 times the upper limit of normal. That was a result we see in someone having a heart attack, a result I've seen of people having a heart attack, and that was my 15-year-old son. He ultimately was on strict activity restrictions for 3 months, which included using the elevator at the school and not being able to perform in band without having chest pains. The tough thing with COVID is we don't know if he'll have lifelong effects. We'll find that out as time goes on, but we don't know that now. The SDMA used mitigation measures last year to give these children a chance to continue in-person learning. We know that's the best thing for them. Now that we are up against a much more contagious variant, we are currently planning to go in with our guard down. I look at the proposed sports schedules, team meals, homecoming plans, all of these things that these children deserve and would love to be able to do this year, and I really want those things to happen for them. Wearing a mask and focusing on social distancing might give us a chance. Completely ignoring the recommendations for masking and other mitigation strategies makes it very unlikely. Our children deserve to be safe, and even though we may not like it, masks and distancing are the best we have for those under 12. Also, people need to keep in mind, allowing vaccinated people to be exposed to and to come down with COVID is not harmless. It gives the virus more opportunity to mutate into something that can eventually escape our vaccines. I do think it would be important for a question to be answered this evening so that folks can fully understand how quarantine and absences will work with positive COVID in the unmasked classroom. I think that people will be shocked to know the amount of absences and what that will do to attendance, so I think that would be something important to follow up on. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to start by saying thank you first.
Thank you for getting the message. Name, address.
I'll get to it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'd like to start by, I gotta get by this in 3 minutes, so I'll go past it. So I'd like to start by saying thank you to our school board for serving our community in this very important role. I used to think, and still do think, serving on the school board should be easy. Should. I know it is currently not easy, but it should be. After all, when dealt with a decision, the core question should be what is best interest of our kids? And then act and vote accordingly. So I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Todd Leibniz from Menomonie. I'm the father of 3 children, 2 graduates of MHS, 1 will be a senior this fall. I graduated from MHS many years ago and then went to UW-Madison where I earned degrees in microbiology and biochemistry. I then went to U of Minnesota and received a degree to practice dentistry and have done so for the past 22 years. I've been wearing a mask at work long before school and since I basically get spit on every day as I work in people's mouths. I do not say these things to make me sound qualified in this discussion as it's really just common sense. What are we here for? Is it for what's best for our children? Then I say no masks. Very few people wear their masks correctly, especially kids. In fact, today, watching people with masks, they touch them. They're up, they're down, they're in their pockets, they're in their purse. They drop them on the floor. They're dirty, and then they put them back on their mouths. Nobody does this. Nobody does it correctly. Pardon me. And then basically they are counterproductive and force people to touch their face, which is exactly what you should not do. This is not how they are intended to be used, but this is how they are used. We should be teaching our kids to wash their hands before they eat to protect themselves and after they eat to not spread germs and protect others. This makes sense. This makes common sense. According to the CDC, our children are much more likely to be killed in a vehicle accident than COVID. It's not even close. So should we ban them from vehicles? We should promote healthy eating and exercise. Get outside and play with other kids. Take your vitamins and breathe fresh, clean air. Do you know smiling boosts a person's immune system as it does seeing other people smile? I don't even want to get to the end to talk about the psychological effects this has on our kids, and it does have psychological effects. In conclusion, we need to do what's best for our children, and that is not force them to wear masks. They have nothing to fear of this virus unless we create that fear artificially.
Thank you. Our next speaker is, I think it's Ryan Martin.
Good afternoon, school board members. My name is Ryan Martin. I live at 550th Street in Cedar Falls. My wife and I have 6 children tied to the SDMA, 2 children that have graduated, 1 currently in high school, 1 in middle school, and 2 in the elementary, so I'm speaking from a place of vested interest. First and foremost, I want to say thank you for hearing me today and thank you for your service to our school district and our community. Some might say, here we are again discussing another potential mask mandate for our school system or our children. But I'd argue that we are here again to discuss how the school board and the county would like to dictate how we are to parent and care for the safety, health, and well-being of our own children. By now, the thought of SARS-CoV-2 or COVID-19 going away is fleeting at best for most of us, I'm sure. After all, the common cold as we know it, which is also a virus, has over 200 different variations at this point and accounts for more visits to the doctor in the US than any other condition according to the American Lung Association. As unfortunate as it may be, COVID-19 is here to stay. With that being said, we all have our own opinions regarding masking and other COVID-19 mitigation measures and can easily support those opinions and facts with a few clicks of a mouse. I'm not here to debate the efficacy of masks, or other measures, but to stand up for my right as a parent to care for the safety and well-being of my children without some dictatorial intervention from this board or the county. In my opinion, the school board has already worked diligently to offer alternative learning options for individuals to choose which suits the needs and safety of their students and families best, one of which is still the option to wear a mask if deemed necessary by the individual. I'll emphasize the choice to wear a mask or the choice to use alternative learning options. After all, if masks work, then anyone who chooses to wear one is welcome to do so, but it shouldn't be dictated by this board or anyone other than the families and their students. Now again, we can argue all the alleged pros and cons of wearing a mask, but I'll refrain from that discussion as I feel it will lead us nowhere. I would like to point out a few data points that I feel support my argument for parental and student choice. In Dunn County, we currently have 35 fatalities from COVID-19. In the most recent data available, 2018, Dunn County has 89 deaths from heart disease, 68 deaths from cancer, and 8 deaths from diabetes. All deaths that come too soon or unexpectedly are a tragedy, and I'm not trying to make light of that. But with these statistics in mind, why hasn't the school board made decisions in the past for mandatory exercise programs or mandated certain diets and nutrition for at-risk students and staff? Maybe mandatory drug screening and monitoring of carcinogen-carrying substance usage. The answer is the board has not historically bypassed the parents' or students' health decisions and shouldn't start now. I would like to close with personal testimony from someone who couldn't be here this evening.
Okay, we've hit a 30-minute mark. I guess I'd ask the board with your pleasure to have 7 more. If we continue in that 21 minutes.
I'd like to make a motion to give everyone 3 minutes.
Okay. I don't think we need a motion if it's.
We want to hear it. I want to hear it.
Huh? Is there any objection to continuing as we are?
Yeah.
Okay. So, it's here 7 or 8. Our next speaker will be Abraham Smith.
I'm certain that you, like me, think parents deserve the freedom to work hard and support their families and make choices for their families. I'm certain that you, just like me, think that children deserve to go to school in person and run and play with other kids like we did, like all of us here did when we were kids. The best way to guarantee that is to require masks in the SDMA this fall. I want to put you in the perspective of my daughter, who's 5 years old, entering kindergarten. If you say optional masks, what does that mean for her? You can say it's a family choice which way you're going to go. Each family has its own opinions. So when my 5-year-old daughter goes to school, a new school with no friends, a teacher she doesn't know, all alone, the only kid in her class wearing a mask, because if she gets sick, even though she's healthy, if she gets sick, her grandparents are going to die because they're on chemotherapy. Her daughter, my other daughter, who is only 1 year old and has various medical problems, is also at risk. Now, my 5-year-old's healthy. Why should she not enjoy school, right? But if she gets sick because kids aren't wearing masks, that cascades. So, from her perspective, her loving father says, Clara, please go to school. Please wear a mask. It'll keep your family safe. But her teachers aren't wearing a mask. Her friends aren't wearing a mask. What does she do? If we say optional masks, we are delegating this decision, which everyone has very strong informed opinions about, to the 5-year-olds in kindergarten. If you say optional, it's not our choice, it's their choice, and that's not right. That's not fair to those kids. We have to make a call. We're going to require masks, or say, screw it, we're done with this, and everyone can get sick. Those are our 2 options. I don't see any other way out of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Bobby Stockton.
Hello, my name is Bobby Stocky. I reside on 577th Street. My husband is a teacher in the school district. Our 3 children all attended Menomonie School District. The health and safety of my husband, as well as the entire community, is my utmost concern. Increasing COVID cases seem to be the reasoning to use to make decisions about masks and lockdowns. However, the CDC recently announced that the PCR test used to identify COVID is fraudulent. Let me say that again. The CDC on their website publicly admitted the PCR test is unable to differentiate between influenza and COVID. In fact, the CDC has advised medical providers to stop using the PCR test. That means that all the COVID cases identified by PCR tests that are being used as a way to make decisions about the health and safety of our children and our community are based on fraudulent tests. I can tell you from experience that my son attending University of Wisconsin last fall was one of those people identified as fraudulently having a positive test from PCR. The fact that PCR test does not differentiate between influenza and COVID should tell you that decision-making based on cases identified by a fraudulent test is not good decision-making.
Right.
There are many studies that show masks do nothing to prevent viral spread. In fact, at least 3 studies from the National Institute of Health show that masks do more to harm than actually prevent disease. Specifically, the studies show that masks reduce oxygen, trap moisture and bacteria, which can lead to pneumonia, as well as other health issues. But the CDC and NIH choose to ignore this information. I hope that you do not. There are many medical professionals in Wisconsin and around the country willing to testify that masks do more to harm people than protecting them from fraudulently identified cases. Now, as a board member, you're in a tough spot. If you're worried about being sued, consider that the science clearly shows by mandating masks, you are doing more to harm the children and teachers of the community than protect them. I'm asking you not to ignore the science. Not only does science show that the PCR test is fraudulent, science also shows that masks do more harm than good. Please do not harm the children and teachers of this community by mandating masks.
And I'm from Menomonie, Wisconsin. I'm the mother of a high schooler and a grandma to both pre-K and kindergartner this year in the Menomonie School District. First, I wanted to point out the approved 6-4 legislature that was passed August 3rd, 2021 by the Joint Committee for Review of Administrative Rules, who voted to require the UW system to follow the law and issue an emergency rule if campuses want to issue COVID-19 mandates for students and camp visitors. Now the UW system is subject to the review of the JCRAR, who could suspend parts or all of the UW system's emergency rule, which I think sets a precedent for Wisconsin public schools as well. Additionally, I'd like to point out the Primary Doctor Medical Journal. I just printed one and I'll give it to you guys. But it states, it had an article on hypoxia, hypercapnia, and its physiological effects dated November 2nd of 2020 that was peer-reviewed and revised on November 9th of 2020. The in-depth study covered the effects that wearing a mask causes physiological changes to multiple organ systems, including the brain, the heart, the lungs, the kidney, and the immune system. This supports the abundance of other medical studies available on the dangers of prolonged mask wearing. Also, did you know the World Health Organization's list of essential medicines includes ivermectin, and that a meta-analysis of 49 trials of ivermectin treating COVID-19 in humans, or I should say COVID in humans, have all shown positive results, and that the medical doctors are including vitamin D, C, and zinc in the COVID recovery process. Dr. Colleen Huber states, and I quote, "Ivermectin was almost made for COVID because it blocks the 3 parts of the spike protein, and it blocks viral replication, and it won't let it into the human cell. Plus, it has a wonderful safety profile. 3.7 billion doses have been given since 1975, and in all ages, children were fine, no pregnancies were lost," end of quote. Here are some quick rhetorical questions for you. Wouldn't you seek a second or even a third opinion from other medical experts on your own serious medical conditions instead of trusting just one person? Does the CDC have clear proof on the effectiveness of masks when they go from no mask to 1 mask to 2 masks or even 3? What happened to children being low risk for getting the virus? Why did social distancing go from 6 feet down to 3 this year? Why are we letting fear control our own right to make safe, healthy, and informed decisions that we each deem are best for our children and families? I know your intentions are all good, but why are we ignoring the numerous studies on the danger of masks?
Yes. Fran? Take it off? Okay. The next speaker will be Lenny Marshall. Speak right into the mic.
I'm Lady Marshall, 2440 3rd Street East, here in Menomonie. I had 2 kids that went through the school district here, and they're gainfully employed in California and Florida. You all know the CDC recommendations. You have people putting data at you from a lot of different interesting sources. And I'm not going to revisit any of that information. I'm here to tell you about my 3 kids. So the one in Florida, when she got vaccinated, she had a really bad reaction. And for 24 hours, she was miserable. She had chills and fever. And she called me from Florida, and she's crying over the phone. And I know that there's nothing that I can do because it's COVID time, and I can't even get a flight there at that point. I would say no parent should have to go through that. But I wouldn't admit it because I know what happens when kids get COVID. Kid number 2 that I'm going to talk about today is my stepson. He's 10 years older than the twins. And he lives in Colfax. He's married, and his mother-in-law lives with him. She doesn't believe in COVID, and so she brought it home. And he got COVID. And for 2 weeks, he was so sick, he couldn't even get his own groceries. We would leave groceries on his doorstep and pray that he did not get to be hospitalized because we knew we could not go to visit him. That's truly something that no parent should have to go through. And if he had gone into the hospital, that would have been even worse. He continues to suffer from symptoms of long COVID. It's real. I've seen it happen in my child. And let me tell you about the 3rd kid, number 3 in California. She has her degree in microbiology, and she works in a lab, and she processes COVID tests all day long. COVID tests are real, they work. And moreover, she called me last week and said she's really scared because with Delta, they're seeing more and more breakthrough cases where people who have been vaccinated aren't getting Delta anyway because it's not transmissible. So I encourage you to keep our children safe by giving them the protection that they need, especially when they cannot be vaccinated. Thank you very much.
The next speaker is Maggie Venable, if I didn't butcher the last name.
No, you're perfect.
Hi, my name is Maggie Venable. You did perfect. 3409 Briar Crest Drive. Good evening, school board, superintendent, and administration. Thank you for allowing me to address you this evening and speak on behalf of many parents. The past 17 months have been hard. Many decisions have had to be made that affected each family, student, and staff member of the Menomonie Area School District differently, and I would be lying if I said I would have wanted to be the person in charge of making those decisions. I believe that the decisions of the past 17 months were most likely far more than any of you ever signed up for. You signed up to work to improve our school district, not to manage a pandemic, or to outsource those decisions that you needed to make about managing a pandemic to unelected bureaucrats at the county, state, and federal levels. One thing the past 17 months has taught me as a parent is the line between our parental authority and the education system has been very blurred. Our parental rights do not end when our children enter the school building or classroom. The school district's responsibility is to provide a quality education, an education focused on extracting each student's abilities, achievements, and making them post-secondary ready. Our responsibility as parents is to be fully informed, involved, and engaged in our children's education and environment at school. It is also our responsibility to make all of the healthcare decisions. We do not need to be a doctor, an epidemiologist, or a public health specialist. We do not need any special title or credentials after our names. Because when it comes to a child, the only 3 letters that matter are MOM and DAD. Those three magical letters make every parent the subject matter expert and the only person qualified to decide what is in the best interest of their child. I respectfully ask the school board and the administration to allow parents to make all COVID-related decisions, included but not limited to masking, testing, and close contact quarantine going forward, because one blanket decision does not fit all families. Only parents know what is in the best interest for their child's immediate and long-term mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional health. Parents are not uninformed on either side of this decision. Parents simply have different views and priorities on what is in the best interest of their children. And we as parents have the right to choose for what's in the best interest of our individual families. We as parents trust that you would approach us with the respect and willingness to work together. Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Gianna Besser. I might have messed that one.
My name is Gianna Bessert. My address is E4840 430th Avenue in Menomonie, Wisconsin. Thank you for listening this evening. I hope you guys are having a good night. I appreciate what you do for our school district, and I appreciate what you do for our city. I just have a couple of points that I want to make. They're pretty brief. First is when we look at COVID, and it's terrible, right? It's terrible and it's scary, and we feel scared. And I think fear can do a lot to us. It can motivate how we behave, motivate how we treat others. But one thing we have that I have not heard a lot about is my immune system. I've been provided with an immune system. And I want to talk about our immune system just from layman's terms. I was reading this and I thought it was amazing. So if you walk on the ground and you have a wound and you have pathogens that come to that wound, you have 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 of these miraculous things in your body that go and like shoot holes in that pathogen, bacteria, etc. And when that doesn't work and some of that goes into the bloodstream, you have this amazing immune system. 5 more amazing cells in your body come through and they go to the bloodstream and they start shooting at things and killing them. I think that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. We cannot forget that. Okay, number 2, I ask, can I trust the United States Public Health Service? Now I want to, but can I? Here's just one reason. In 1932, 600 African American men from Alabama were enlisted by the United States Public Health to partake in a study to observe the natural history of untreated syphilis. The subjects were unaware of this and were simply told they were receiving treatment for bad blood. Actually, they received no treatment at all. What suffering was caused? So I just ask, are we being experimented upon? Can I really trust the United States public health system? I want to, but in the last 18 months, I really have some red flags. Lastly, I want to talk about what's on the mask box. So when you go to Walmart and you look at a mask box, this is what it says. The information says, this product has not been FDA cleared or approved. This is for emergency use only. Also said on another box, warning, this product is an air loop mask. This is not a respirator, and it will not provide any protection against COVID-19 or other viruses or contaminants. Wearing an air loop mask does not reduce the risk of containing any disease or infection. The user is solely responsible. Single use only. Thank you.
Communication is Jennifer Flanders.
Thanks for letting me speak tonight. I'm gonna try to be fast because I have lots of notes. This is not even much. I'm Jen Flanders. I live in Wilson, actually. I am here to defend and to protect my nieces and nephews that are in this school district. Having grown up here, having had my children here in this district, I will defend all the children, no matter who they belong to. First of all, the only children, young lady, who have died of COVID are ones that were terminally ill. And if we're gonna talk about that, first let's talk about medical malpractice. How many children have died of that? Not to mention cars, not to mention swings. I have a great aunt who died at the age of 9 falling off a swing. Perhaps we should get rid of all of those. Let's just get rid of all the playground equipment and then we'll be safe. How about football? How about hockey? How about demolition derbies, racing? Let's get rid of it all. If we're gonna protect one, let's protect them all, right? How long after the mask mandate will there be mandatory testing, mandatory vaccines? How about a star on our arm? You're all in the education business, surely you know what that's about, right? Okay, can you please provide the isolated virus and definitive proof of the variant? Do you have some type of specialist on this board that no one in the world has to be able to distinguish between variants? How have you as a board been able to distinguish between COVID and other viral sicknesses or illnesses? According to Nobel laureate, renowned virologist Luc Montagnier, I have no idea how to say his name, there is actually a 2-year expectancy for anyone who has received the vaccine. 2 years, and that's proven by studies, multiple studies.
I pray none of you have gotten the vaccine. But I tell you, my daughter has. And you know what? Now I have to decide between my children. Because I have several children who are at risk. One of them being my youngest, who has a liver that does not work correctly. So now I have to decide if my child, who decided she was gonna believe this BS and go get the vaccine, and now she can transmit it to her little brother, who will then die because she decided she was gonna protect people? Bullshit. It's time that you, like the previous speaker said, or a couple ago, you got into the education business and stayed out of the healthcare business. Also, here's what's gonna happen if you pass a mask mandate or mandatory vaccines or anything, and you can shut me off if you want to, but it's gonna go viral. Hundreds of the parents in this school district are gonna pull their children out, and you are gonna lose 14 grand. Meeting at 6:30 tomorrow night at Calvary Assembly of God to discuss that.
I just want to take this opportunity to thank everybody that came out tonight and voiced their concerns, no matter which side you're on. That's what this forum is for. So I appreciate that. We'll continue to move on. Just for those of you that are wondering, the discussion on the COVID portion of the meeting does not happen until item 4A, so we have some things to go through first before we get to that.
I make the motion that you move it up.
No, I'm sorry.
We're all here.
Doesn't work that way here.
Yes, it can.
Yeah. Hey, I'm pleased. You guys have been respectful.
That was respectful.
Okay, item G on the agenda, revenue and expense reports for the month ending July 2021. Any questions on those? Actually, Leah, there you are. If you come up. What did I skip? I'm sorry. Item D. You're right, I did. Agenda order approval of revision.
Can you please pull out the minutes?
It's very hard to hear with the crowd being so noisy.
Be quiet back there.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. The consent agenda. Okay. Very good. We'll do that. We'll move it down to item 4C. Okay. We'll pull them out of the consent agenda. That's from the last meeting. Okay. Sorry about that. Item G, revenue and expense reports for the month ending July 2021. Leah, please.
If you'd like to open up the revenue report, we'll take a look at that first. As you can see in that report, we've only received in $233.91 for the month of July. And that was for interest received. Most of the revenues received in the month of July are actually receivables that get looked back to June 30th. So that's why that is rather low. The next report is the expenses by function, and this is for the general fund 10. If you'd like to open that report. For Fund 10, general operations, we are at slightly higher expenditures this year compared to last year. We're at 3.26% compared to 2.71. For special education, Fund 27, we're at 44% compared to 63.63% last year at the same time. And then food service, Fund 50, we're at 1.16% compared to 2.88. The
notes for the month, for the reasons for the variances. Obviously, bill timing, bills get paid at different times each year, and some get paid in July, some might get paid in August, just depending on the timing. This year we did have higher summer school costs because last year we did not have the same, summer school program running. And then we've also had some increases for technology purchases for networking equipment like servers and stuff like that. So those expenses were a little bit higher. And then the last report is the expenses for all funds. And for July 2021, we're at 2.92% compared to 1.91%. So they're again slightly higher.
Okay, any questions for them? Thank you, Lynn. Item H, monthly employment report. Is there for you to review? Any questions on that? Consent agenda, minus the minutes from the last meeting. Is there a motion to approve? Excellent. Carl, is there a second?
Second.
Amy? Any discussion, any questions?
Dave, just to clarify, so the minutes have removed for the minutes from the July 26th meeting, correct?
Yeah, correct, on me.
Great, thank you.
So the consent agenda still contains the minutes from our regular board meeting on July 12th. Financial reports, the board approved general fund checks in the amount of $2,291,055.03. And cash receipts in the amount of $67,161.15 for the month of July 2021. We have no donations exceeding $1,000. We have a motion and a second. Amy. Okay.
Did you send it through?
Okay, motion passes by a vote of 8-0. Stepped out of the vote. Item 2A, action to approve personnel actions. Is there a motion to approve? I'll move to approve. Charlie, is there a second? Angie? Any discussion? Okay, seeing none. Janet? I keep forgetting. Clint, are you able to hear everything okay?
Yeah, I've been able to hear everything and it's been working actually, I've been able to focus on, so.
Thank you. Okay, motion passes by unanimous vote of 9-0. Moving on to the action agenda. Item 4A is action to approve the COVID-19 plan for 2021-2022. I would ask the board what your pleasure is, if you'd like to have discussion first, and then have a motion for approval, or if you'd rather have a motion up front.
I'd like to make a motion to amend the plan from last board meeting. There were 3 plans put forward, and I I would like to, make a motion that we adopt Plan A, which is optional masking, grades 4K through 12, and contact tracing by the health department, grades 4K through 12.
Okay, we have a motion to amend the current plan. Is there a second? Is there a second?
I'll second.
Tanya. Okay, discussion, we'll go by our normal discussion rules. Before we start, I guess I'll turn it over to Joe for some comments.
Sure. I would like to point out that the district medical advisor, Dr. Horvath, is here, and also Katie Gallagher, the director of public health in Dunn County. Thank you both for being here. So if board members have questions, you certainly can direct questions to Dr. Horvath or to Katie Gallagher. I want to say thank you to everyone who's here. I also want to say thank you to everyone who has communicated with us over the last couple of weeks. It really is inspiring to see how much interest there is in our school district. And I know there's a lot of differences in how we all think about this, but what a great thing that so many people care about what's going on. That doesn't happen all over. This is something special that's in our school district, and we're seeing it more in districts across the country. And maybe that's one positive thing that's coming out of this, is there's more attention to what's happening in schools, and I really am inspired by that. So thank you all, no matter what side you're on. I don't want to go too long, but I just want to tell you a little bit about this journey that I've been on. And I appreciated some of the comments that the speakers had. I mean, this has been one heck of a 16, 17, 18-month ordeal. And I was very hopeful when we got to the end of February, and we saw no staff cases, our student cases and exclusions plummeted. And we ended the school year really, as close to normal as we could expect at that time. And the month of June was pretty terrific, at least for me. I don't know what everyone's personal situation was, but it felt like, boy, maybe we're on track. And you started having dreams about what the 2021, 2022 school year could look like. And you get chills up your spine, thinking about this could be summer again. And very unfortunately, about July 1st, the news started to surface. And I saw some things that seemed eerily similar to what we saw in February of 2020. And that's when my summer ended. And other than coaching Little League and a couple of things with the family, it's been all COVID. And I don't claim to be a medical expert whatsoever. I certainly haven't spent as much time on this as Katie Gallagher. But I doubt there's many people in our community who have spent as many waking hours reading about this, communicating with other superintendents, state experts, national experts, and just trying to develop the best recommendations possible. And making it even more difficult is that this continues to be a changing situation. What we thought might work on July 15th, all of a sudden didn't seem like it would be a very good plan on July 31st. And now we're sitting here on August 9th, and I'm even more concerned as we think about our schooling for next year. When we look at last year, we had a lot of success, and I'm so proud of our students and staff, and I've said that so many times. And our families were terrific to work with. I think people were patient. I think people gave us the benefit of the doubt. And I can't thank people enough for doing that. I think it gave our kids the best experience we could give them, considering the situation. So what were some of the things that led to our success last year? Well, first of all, we were able to distance. We did have lower enrollment because we offered choice in education, and we had a number of students, not that many, but we had a number of students that chose virtual learning. That kept our enrollment in the buildings lower, and it allowed our teachers and our students to do amazing things. I mean, I can't believe what our principals and teachers did. When I saw Mr. Sterry building temporary walls to expand classrooms and get those desks 6 feet apart, that made a huge difference. When we started out last September, it actually wasn't going too well. I kind of was feeling the pressure. I think we ended up with about 13 cases in the month of September last year, and that led to almost 3,000 days of missed student instruction for kids who were quarantined. We knew that wasn't okay, and something had to change. And I'm so proud that we were able to make those changes. So then when we look to this year and we think about, okay, so how can we be successful again this year? Again, I was feeling really good about it in July. But now that we're sitting here in August, I'm very, very concerned. And not even getting to the arguments about the value of masks or the dangers of COVID, but just looking at the rules the way they are and looking at, kids being in our schools, I'm very concerned. Distancing, I don't think we're gonna be able to get the 6 feet of distancing that we were able to last year. Unless something really surprises us with the virtual enrollments this week, we are going to have more enrollment this year by quite a bit than we did last year. And we were right on the edge last spring to still being able to offer 6 feet of spacing. We were 1 or 2 students away in some of our elementary schools where we just weren't gonna be able to do it. We don't have the staffing that we had last year at this time. We had over about $1 million of staffing last year to get that 6 feet of spacing and to be able to provide that type of environment to keep kids safe. Also last year, all the kids were in masks, and it was terrible. I hate wearing the masks just as much as anybody. But our kids did it, and I was so impressed. I really didn't think the first graders or second graders would be able to do it with such fidelity like they did, but they did a great job with it. And I was super proud of them and super impressed. So looking towards this year, what stays the same and what's different? Well, the distancing is going to be less. I really truly believe that we're gonna be under 6 feet in most cases. I'm certain that we can get 3 feet. I'm not certain we can get 6. I'm really concerned with what I read about the Delta variant. And again, I'm not an expert, I'm not a medical expert, but it's pretty clear that the Delta variant is quite a bit more transmissible than the COVID we were dealing with last year. So between less distancing and a higher transmissibility of the COVID Delta variant, I do think it's a recipe for more spread than what we saw. And we did see a significant amount of spread, not so much in our schools. Most of the cases that we identified, we really felt came from the home and came to school, but we felt that the systems we had set up in our school stopped that spread in our classrooms. Maybe not 100% of the time. We did have some classrooms where, just the nature of that programming wasn't going to allow us to have some of those mitigation strategies with as much consistency as other classrooms, but for the most part, we did really well. So if we look at a more transmissible variant, we look at less distancing, and now we start talking about masks, it really makes me concerned, not just about the spread and possibly people getting sick, but the way the CDC has set up the system, it has made some positive changes if we're gonna follow the guidelines. One, I can't remember exactly the date of it, but sometime during the last year, they changed the quarantine guidelines where you no longer have to quarantine for 14 days. There's an abbreviated quarantine. So if you're asymptomatic, no symptoms, and you can get that negative test, you can actually come back quite a bit early. So that should help limit the exclusions. The other piece to it is the vaccines. We have about 35% of our students that are eligible for the vaccine that are vaccinated. We have about 70% of our staff. And when we had to close the high school last year for, I can't remember how many weeks, but about a month, 3 weeks, something like that, it wasn't so much that it was spreading like wildfire in our schools. It was because we didn't have enough staff members to continue to offer the programming that we needed to offer. And we actually used some of our teachers from the high school level to keep our elementary and middle school open, because that's one of the priorities we had, we talked about, was prioritizing the younger kids in terms of keeping them in person. But with 70% of our staff vaccinated, I think that we should be able to stay open this year, no matter what choices the board makes. But I am concerned about whether or not we're gonna be able to keep our kids in school. So I talked about the abbreviated quarantine, which will help. We talked a little bit about the vaccination, because if you're fully vaccinated, you don't need to quarantine unless you have symptoms. But then the third piece, which I really was pleased to see, because I was so frustrated. I really thought the guidelines last year were pretty draconian in terms of the 6 feet for 15 minutes, even if you're sitting at your desk quietly reading or taking a test. But I think that the CDC made the change down to 3 feet if both people are masked. I think that's a game changer. And I think that if we want to keep our kids in school, I do think the masks would play a big role. If we're gonna follow the CDC guidelines and we go unmasked, we're really losing an opportunity to keep our kids in school. So I've talked about it with the principals, I've talked about it with so many staff members. Talking to the elementary teachers, I think a lot of them would give up, and say, yes, let's go ahead and go with the masks as long as the kids can have a more normal experience and play with each other and that type of thing.
No way.
But in talking with the lead team, we do think that in terms of what we've read, in terms of what we've heard, we think that if we want to keep our kids in school, that's our number one priority, is keeping our kids in school for in-person learning. When we look at those kids who aren't eligible to be vaccinated yet, the kindergarten through sixth grade, that's where the masking would be critical. So I know you have a lot to think about tonight.
You're not the leaders. The people are the leaders. You serve us.
It's true. Please,
And then you make too much money doing it.
please, you guys,
Not tonight.
let us get through it.
The point is that if we are serious about trying to keep our kids in school, the best way to keep our kids in school is to have masking K through 6.
Please, let him talk. It's gonna be a long discussion. There's gonna be viewpoints on both sides, so hear everybody out.
And if we don't want a mask, I realize that's a choice that the board is gonna have to make, but just please understand that if we don't mask, we're probably looking at a lot of exclusions. And I don't think any of us want our, especially our youngest kids, I don't think we want them home on quarantine if we can help it. That's all I got.
Okay, we have an amendment on the floor right now. Any discussion on the amendment? You made an amendment to the plan, right?
Yeah.
Main motion, okay. So, approve the plan as amended with,
No. I mean,
no, with the A,
yes,
so.
correct.
Discussion on that, and just so everybody understands, Plan A, the amendment that Angie, or the motion that Angie made calls for optional masking, grades 4K through 12, and it calls for contact tracing to be done by the health department, grades 4K through 12. So discussion from board members, you'll have up to 2 times to speak, 3 minutes each time, unless the board votes to suspend the rules.
I would like to speak.
Angie?
I was elected by the base of voters who want personal medical freedom and want to be able to make this mask decision for their children. We should protect the rights of students and parents by resting with the parents the decision whether their children should wear masks. Children have a right to a normal education. When the data was analyzed in Florida for the last school year, schools, including those that did not require masks, did not drive community transmission of COVID. We have also seen that masking children may lead to negative health effects, which I have personally experienced with my own daughter having headaches last year. Forcing children to wear masks that are dirty, damp, containing bacteria and fungus, among other contaminants, is not a decision I can support. From my research, including a German study published in July of this year, masks are toxic to children as they are breathing in carbon particles at a rate higher than what is accepted even for an adult, at times 12 times the acceptable rate. Their study found the younger the child, the higher the toxic particles they were inhaling and exhaling inside their masks. The more moist the mask, the higher the parts per million. Breathing this in has effects on the kids, and it does affect their health negatively. Alex Hall stated at our last meeting that COVID is the top 10 cause of death in this country for our kids. What she didn't tell you is it is a distant 10th behind motor vehicle crash, firearm injury, including suicide, cancer, suffocation, including suicide, drowning, drug overdose, congenital anomalies, heart disease, and fire. A young child has a 0.008% chance of contracting COVID along with a 99.995 recovery rate. Will you stop letting your child ride in an automobile? Will you not allow them to swim? COVID is a virus. It will not be going away anytime soon. We have lived with viruses for hundreds of years. Our COVID plan states that it is created to identify a variety of mitigation measures and learning environments that may be needed during the school year to provide families choice. We have worked hard as a board to provide different types of instruction and mitigation measures as far as cleaning, and I believe we need to work hard to provide parents a choice when it comes to the health of their children in regard to masking.
That's right.
I didn't, but I can make a motion to suspend the normal rules.
We have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
We have a second. Okay, we take roll call vote.
Okay, Chris?
Yes.
Mark?
No.
Tanya?
No.
Clint?
No.
Carl?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Charlie?
Yes.
Angie?
No.
Dave?
No. Motion fails by a 5-4 vote. I will say that if we get further along in the discussion and it's warranted, we could try again if we need to, so just so people know that. Okay, further discussion on the motion as presented. I will also say that we have Dr. Horvath and Katie Gallagher here. At some point in time, I would like to hear from them as well. Amy?
So are we gonna hear from them, or can we ask them questions?
We could certainly ask them questions. If they have questions, I'd ask them to come to the table and take the mic.
Well, before I can understand this motion, and which I would not at this point, I would really like to hear from our experts, because they are experts and they've gone to school and they understand. My biggest question would be, to either of you, probably Dr. Horvath, is can you address what people said about the PCR test?
Thanks for the question. If I may, can I just introduce myself for the audience? I think this group has heard from me in the past. I am Dr. Paul Horvath. I live here in Menomonie. I am here as the board's advisor. I am here to guide you. That is my purpose here. I am a board certified and currently practicing emergency physician. I'm not a pathologist. I'm not a lab expert. Board member Bill Swanson, I don't know that I can adequately answer your question.
Other discussion from the board?
I guess my question would be for Katie. You know, at the meeting 2 weeks ago, we had a conversation about the earlier modification that we made to the proposed plan that Dr. Zadowski had shared. And, you know, again, the idea of keeping as many kids in school for as many days as possible, we all agree in person is the ideal. And there's folks who on both sides of this conversation have said tonight, if this doesn't go one way or the other, my kids won't be in person in school. The other side of the discussion, they have the right to stay home. And so, you know, as a board, we're sitting here trying to make a decision knowing that no matter what we decide, there will be people who stay home who don't get the ideal in-person education. Since that meeting 2 weeks ago, we've started to learn some things about the Delta variant. In my day job, I consult with rural hospitals. In the South, there's several. 5 of the 6 rural hospitals I talked with their CNO, chief nurse officers yesterday, they are full of COVID patients. Little Rock, Arkansas has no ICU beds, peds or otherwise. So something has changed with Delta. I don't know that we know everything about that, but my question, Katie, is could you share with us what the most current is on Delta spread, severity, kids, and so forth?
And I was hoping that my medical advisor could also come and speak with us today, just from that perspective as well, Dr. Shaw. So thank you for the question.
we are learning more and more about the Delta variant. I think what's important to know is what we're seeing in Dunn County right now. So I'm going to share with you about our most recent outbreak. So we had a meeting with folks spaced 3 to 6 feet apart, unmasked. I have 8 breakthrough cases. The index case was vaccinated. The other 7 cases are vaccinated. They have spread in their homes. So this is a game changer. When I say that the Delta variant is different than anything we've seen from COVID-19, both in transmissibility and breakthrough case, that is real experience here. What I'm grateful for in those vaccinated people, even though they have comorbidities and they have advanced age, I have no hospitalizations, and that's important. Yeah, and I would just echo what Katie has said, as far as what we are seeing.
Please.
Certainly there, can be and will be breakthrough cases, with the vaccine. It's not 100%, we know that going in. It is an extremely, effective vaccine, one of the most, effective that we have, in recent, vaccines. So we know that there's gonna be breakthrough. The alarming thing is the amount of breakthrough that there has been. That is what made the CDC change their recommendations, this past month. And that was from the research that came through from Massachusetts. So we can continue to, try and say that it's not happening, that it's not going to affect us, but as Katie just explained to you, it has happened. It's here in Menomonie. It's not just in Massachusetts, breaking through. We don't know what this means. People are always saying, you change your recommendations, and you said this, you said that. People need to remember that we are living science right now. We are in a research experiment, and we will change what we are saying. So what we say today could be different tomorrow. And people need to understand that. When you come to see a physician or you listen to KT, as far as public health things, as far as every other infectious disease outbreak or issue or concern that you've ever had for your family or your loved ones, she was the expert that helped us with that. You come to providers to ask for our medical advice. I think it's really very clear. We don't know what's coming, but I don't believe that it's going to be good for our kids, that they won't be able to be in school in person.
Okay. Any other discussion? One question I have, Dr. Zanowski, is if Plan A were passed as presented, optional masking grades 4K through 12, contact tracing done by the health department grades 4K through 12. What do you think that would look like as far as if we had a case in a classroom with the exclusions, how would that play out?
Well, and I'd probably defer to KT a little bit on that, but I guess that's my one real concern. Well, there are a lot of concerns, but I totally understand why we want to let parents choose, and I do too. But I just don't think people understand how many exclusions there's going to be. I would guess probably about 1,500 maybe in the month of September. KT, what's it gonna look like if you guys did a contact tracing?
Sure, so our contact tracing ability has changed. We have increased and decreased staff based on need. Currently, I brought 3 contact tracers back yesterday because we are currently in logarithmic growth of cases. Meaning we will outstrip our own ability to contact trace in addition to having cases potentially impacting our healthcare systems as well. So as far as the health department goes, we don't have in real time access to your class rosters. We don't know your teachers and your protocols the same way. It will take us longer to contact trace than it takes the amazing nurses that you have on staff. So what that's going to look like is that I'm going to ask for what that's going to look like is I'm going to ask for a class roster.
and then we're going to immediately exclude until my team can go family by family, teacher by teacher, and understand better the real world situation. It will take us longer than it takes your highly trained nurses to do the work.
So I've looked at Dave, right? So I've been trying to figure this out, and Katie and I have talked a couple times. The state statute is pretty clear that the health department has the legal authority to quarantine people, whether it be in a school or other place in the community. So that's not something as a school district that we can say, well, we don't care what the health department said, you can send your kid to school. So if KT and her contact tracers say that grade 1 at Wakanda is quarantined, we're gonna have to follow that direction. Now, we also are required by law to cooperate. So if KT calls the principal and says, I need a class roster for grade 1 at Wakanda, we're obligated to provide that. So it's not like we could stand in the way of that contact tracing. The question that I'm not certain about, and I've tried to talk to different superintendents about this, and it's kind of new legal ground, I'm not certain about the idea of quarantining an entire class. I think KT thinks that she has the authority to do that. The way I read the law, I think that, there has to be suspicion of a transmissible disease. I don't know if being in that classroom would fit that standard or not. I do not want to be the test case on that, but I think that's something we would find out in a hurry if we don't contact trace in our school district.
Can we get a copy of that ordinance, please?
One thing I would ask, if you have questions in the audience, if you would be so kind as to put them together in email form and send it to the superintendent. It's the best way to handle it. I mean, I'm sorry, the way the format of the meeting, the way things are set up, that's just the structure of it. So, Tanya.
Quick question, and I'm quickly just pulling up items to verify if I read correctly. Did we not say in A that it would be county? Plan A would have county. Plan B then would be school. Was that not one of the benefits of Plan B? And then Plan C would go back to county. Why the flipping? Or has it always been contact tracing for the county?
No, let me pull up the document. Plan A would be the county doing the contact tracing. Plan B would be a combination of the county and the school, to be and or the county. And Plan C is the school district, like we got last year.
Why shift? Why was that even an option? So what are the supposed benefits of only going with the county versus a mixture versus just the school?
I have had questions about that, Tanya, and concerns of why is the school district contact tracing? That it's not the school district's job, why are we getting involved in the medical piece? We can do it, it takes a lot of resources. And I know that there's a number of schools, and that's the interesting piece to this, is I think we are gonna learn a lot in the month of September. Because in talking to the other superintendents, I'm not aware of any schools in our area that are requiring masks for the start of the school year.
That's right.
I know Claire, they had an article in the paper a couple weeks ago where they were doing mask optional. I don't know if that'll change before the start of the year. But when you start talking the schools to our west, many of them are, I don't know any of them that are masking. I think many of them are not gonna participate in any contact tracing. So, and maybe that's something the board wants to consider. Maybe we look at something for the first month as we all learn more about this and revisit it at the end of September.
Angie.
Why can we not visit it at each board meeting?
We could. And actually, a board member could call a special meeting anytime you'd like to, 24 hours notice, assuming that you get a quorum to attend.
So, no matter what the outcome is tonight, whether we vote no masks, whether we vote all masks, however it turns out, we start the school year, if that's the policy we have starting the school year. The board, all it takes is one board member to call a special board meeting. We put have a special meeting and we can vote to change our policy or amend it. If we start school year with no masks and all of a sudden we're hitting a train wreck and things are going downhill, we have the ability to call a special meeting, get together and change things at that point if necessary. Just want to point out the mechanics of how it could look. Amy?
My question is, why not be proactive? I think it's very important to be proactive because, you know, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I don't want to be responsible for somebody who dies because we voted not to require masks. I think it's important for us to be proactive in the situation and start from there. And then if we're strict, fine. Later on, maybe we can let off, you know, I mean, I don't think this is gonna happen forever, and I think there's gonna be vaccines available for the younger population. And also, I'm very concerned about immunocompromised students, you know, if they're not being treated well, if they can't come to school. You know, and I don't think the virtual option is an equitable education either, for anybody, whether they're, you know, being out of school, I mean, whether they're masked or not masked.
Thank you.
To follow up on what Amy said just a little bit, there would be something to be said for trying to be proactive for the first month, because then we would find out more without the potential exposure. And who knows, maybe, and I think we're actually gonna learn a lot more before September 1st, because there's a lot of schools across the country that are already opening. And we're paying attention very closely to try to learn from those schools and what's working and what's not working. But I would caution the board with the idea of flipping back and forth at any particular meeting, because there are gonna be parents making decisions in terms of the virtual program based on what happens here tonight. The deadline for the virtual program is August 12th, and while we will try to get kids in after August 12th, there's no guarantee. We know that we can get as many kids as we need to in, as long as we have them registered by August 12th. But after that, it's really whatever the capacity is of the program.
Just wanted to double check, Clint, since I'm not able to see you, did you have any questions or comments?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. I am here, and one clarifying point. I know in Plan A, there's been the question of contact tracing and whether or not public health can actually shut down a school. And I actually do have some clarification on that in Dane County case, Davis versus Henrik, which actually adjudicated just this last year. The state Supreme Court actually overruled that case and said that the public health director does not have the authority to close down a I have to clarify, I'm not an attorney, but that precedent has already been set. Like Dr. Zadowski did say, you know, we don't want to be the test for that, but that has been, like I said, the state Supreme Court already ruled on that issue.
Okay, thanks, Clint. Joe?
Clint, thank you for sharing that, and I do think that could come into play, but I think there's a very different distinction that we're talking about. I agree, and I read that case that, you know, it was deemed that the health director could not close that school, but what we're talking about is quarantine, and I'm not aware of a test case that has overruled the public health director's authority to quarantine. And that's my biggest concern. Again, I'm not trying to put a dog in the fight in terms of masking versus non-masking, but I'm worried about keeping our kids in school.
Except, Joe, when we talked about this like a month ago, we were talking about cohorts and how basically a whole room would be excluded. My definition, and once again, I'm not an attorney, but that would be considered closing school if you kick a whole classroom out of quarantine.
I can see that interpretation, Clint. I don't know that that's how it would be interpreted in the courts.
Okay, other discussion? Chris?
This is a question for any of our medical advisors. There's been a lot of suggestion that masking is hurting our children's health and welfare. And I know there was a study that board members feeling cited from Germany, but Germany hasn't had any problems requiring masking for their children. So I'm wondering if you can speak to the validity of the claim that masks pose a significant health risk to our children in the district. Were they to be required to wear masks just for the duration of the school day? Anybody can speak to that?
No.
So I will start and I will send the paper to you, where they have looked at oxygen levels using masks during exertion, and they have found that it's not.
Could the mask participants speak up? We can't hear you.
So in the type of mask I'm wearing, or a cloth face covering, there
Please.
is not a reduction in oxygen levels, and not an accumulation of carbon dioxide.
Then why does ownership test for it?
Dr. Horvath, did you have something to add? Put the mic right up close, please.
If I may, from personal experience, I wear a mask at work every day, all day, every day. Many of the smartest people that I know wear a mask at work all day.
How often do you
I have not seen any convincing data to say that masks have any long-term adverse outcomes.
We sat and I asked them to do the same. When our speakers are speaking, please just let them speak. And we can have a conversation, we can do this. But when you're talking out, we can't hear them, they can't hear us. Just be as respectful to them as they were and we were to you, please.
Can I just make one?
No, you cannot, sir. This is not a public meeting in that way. Dr.
Okay,
Horvath, sorry to interrupt.
Anything else, Dr. Horvath?
Not this time, thank you.
Okay. Board members, any other questions? We have a motion on the table to adopt item A as far as the complete COVID plan. The other thing I would talk about too is there's a lot more to this plan other than the masking component, so there's other things in it that you want to discuss.
I just would like to address the comments about people, they're choosing to pull their kids from school for if we provide an optional masking option for parents. There were a lot of parents last year that pulled their kids from school because they didn't want their kids wearing a mask. So now it would be reversed. I mean, it's a difficult thing because you can't make everyone happy all the time, but I fully feel after the year that we've had, we tried it, I experienced it. I had a daughter who had headaches, who has not had a headache since she has taken her mask off. And I think it's a parent's right, a choice, and it's something that we should support as a board going forward.
That's right, yeah.
Any other board members that have not yet spoken tonight who would like to speak? Chris?
This is more of a follow-up question.
Make sure you get right in the mic, Chris.
I can do that. This is just more of a follow-up question, not really, using this opportunity for me to express my views on this vote that we're picking up. But I am concerned that maybe the public doesn't understand exactly when a student will be facing exclusion. And it's been my understanding that exclusion happens from 3 to 6 feet, and that's going to mean every child in K through 6 who doesn't wear a mask. The only way that you can avoid exclusion is by having mitigation, multi-layered mitigation measures in practice. So it's none of our choice in this matter. But we have to be very clear. I know Dr. Zadowski suggested there could be as many as 1,500 exclusions in the month of September. Both the mom and the dad work in my family. We don't have the ability to have folks step in when that happens. And that's not just what might happen, that's gonna happen. And maybe you guys are in a much better situation than I am. But I'm sure not all of you are. And so this really has nothing to do whether or not we like these masking things or not. There's clear actions and reactions that happen when someone is within 3 to 6 feet of another individual who has COVID and tested positive in our schools. So could you speak to that, add some clarity to that, please?
Sure, so the CDC guidance, close contact, Wisconsin DHS, close contact is within 6 feet for more than 15 minutes cumulatively over a 24-hour period. And so when we have folks that are unmasked, then it's within 6 feet. If both the person that is COVID positive and the person that is the close contact is within 3 to 6 feet and they are both masked, that person is not excluded as a close contact if they are a student. That's a big difference, especially if we're not able to maintain 6 feet of physical distance in the classrooms.
Could I add to that just for a second? And again, this is my concern. I mean, we're talking 1,500 days estimated in the month of September that kids are gonna be sent home. Now, even with masks, there's gonna be some, a fraction of that. The tools are so much better this year, I would estimate maybe 10%. So I mean, just economically, you look at our community and you look at the costs of people missing work. I mean, I'm worried about our employees because a lot of our teachers, a lot of our support staff members have kids in our schools. So if we send a second grader home because they're sitting 4 feet away without a mask, KT is gonna quarantine them. Legally, we're gonna have to follow that quarantine. And now the third grade teacher is gonna have to go home because she needs to care for that child who's home alone. Or the paraeducator who's providing specialized services to one of our children with special needs. That child's not gonna have something, we can't find substitutes. That child's not gonna have someone to help them at school that day because the person who was supposed to care for them now has to be home to care for their quarantined child. Probably for 7 days. So again, this isn't even a masking issue for me. This is an economic issue. This is an issue about keeping our kids in schools, keeping our employees at school. And if we don't do this, I get the choice thing, but I just want to make it very clear, and this is the last time I'm going to say it, because I know I'm going to get a ton of calls. I know our principals are going to get a ton of calls. And this decision is going to have a drastic impact on how many days kids miss school in our district.
How many days did they? One question I have, Joe, for you is if the contact tracing was done by the school district instead of the health department, would that change that?
Theoretically, it shouldn't. I get, it really depends on how it goes with the health department. We will be quicker, and we will be able to be more accurate. So if there is a case in a second grade classroom, we should be able to more quickly identify the kids who don't need to be quarantined. But what KT is saying is that with their capacities and the efficiency that they're gonna be able to provide, her plan would be to quarantine the entire class until their contact tracers can do the stuff that our school nurses do. So whether that's 2 days for those 22 kids or however many kids it is, 2 days more, so that'd be 44 exclusions, compared to if we do it, we may be able to save 44 exclusions in a situation like that. That would be the biggest difference.
I have a question. So when KT asks for a roster from the teacher, you mean to tell me when the teacher provides her that roster, she can't say kids 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 sit next to the positive kid? I mean, it's really not that. You guys are making this, dragging this out and making this a long, prolonged ordeal. It really shouldn't be.
Well, I understand what you're saying, but first of all, KT is not gonna be the one doing the contact tracing. It's gonna be a contact tracer who's gonna get to us when they can, because they're gonna be contact tracing all over the county. So there's gonna be a delay there. We are required to share the roster, and yes, I'm sure that the contact tracer is going to try to get a hold of the teacher right away, just like our school nurse would. But it's not just the seating chart they have to be concerned with. It's, who are they by? There has to be a conversation there. Who'd you sit by at lunch? Who'd you play with on the playground at recess? Who'd you sit next? Another major exposure is on the buses. So we need to ask the child, do you take the bus to school? And, you know, there's a lot that goes into the contact tracing.
So did we not do this last year?
We did.
Okay, so why are we discussing it? It's the same, essentially it's last year, it's just the health department doing it instead of the school district.
Right, but what we're all saying, Angie, is that if the health department does it, it's gonna be a lot less efficient than if we do it.
So did the health department not send out letters to all the families that had COVID last year, and were they not involved anyway?
They were still involved in the contact tracing, but the school part of it mostly got handled by our school nurses. So it was very, well, I don't wanna say it was quick, it was as quick as it could be, within the school part of it.
Reason I brought the question up is, from an exclusion standpoint, if we're better off to have the school do it rather than the health department, that's why I brought it up.
So does the health department have to put a stamp of approval on what the school says, or does the school then trump the health department when they're doing exclusions?
Ultimately, it's the health department who has the power in the determination for quarantine. However, I don't think we had any times last year where the recommendation from the school nurses was overruled by the health department.
Can I ask you a question, Joe? In districts, you said some of the neighboring districts are no masking, no contact tracing. How do they perceive handling that with their health departments?
Sure. And Katie and I have talked about this too. A lot of us can depend on how the health department operates. I do think in some counties, the health department is going to, I don't want to say wash their hands of it, but the health department is not going to take a very active role, is what I've been told. And if that was the case, then the number of exclusions perhaps could be much lower. KT has already designated, and I think she put it in some writing to the board, I believe that was in that letter, that whether or not the district contact traces, her department is still going to actively pursue that. So where some school districts may be eliminating contact tracing in an effort to basically eliminate quarantine or make it voluntary quarantine, I don't think that mechanism is going to work in our school district unless one of two things happen. Either A, KT and the health department do not pursue contact tracing for school district exposures, or two, there's a legal challenge and, there was some sort of stay or legal directive that would not allow the health department to quarantine students unless they met a certain burden of proof. And that's the part that I'm not certain on, and KT probably knows the law better than I do, but neither one of us are lawyers. The question is, where's the burden of proof? When I read it, I tend to interpret it as the burden of proof would be that you have to prove that there's contact to exclude a kid. In the discussions we've had, KT, I believe your version of your interpretation of that would be that you do have the legal authority, and that the burden of proof would be to prove that the kid was not in contact to allow them to come to school. Am I correct in how I said that?
So I'm not a lawyer, and I have not had an opportunity to talk to our court counsel between when we had that conversation earlier today and right now, but that is my understanding.
One of the things too, just to point out in the COVID plan as it's presented tonight, does allow for open participation at extracurricular, such as sports, things like that. In the plan that we're presenting tonight, there's no limitation on spectators for sports, things of that nature. I will also mention there's a federal mandate on masking on buses. That's still in play no matter what we do. That's something that's federally mandated. Could you speak to that, Joe, a little bit?
Yeah, Dave, unfortunately, I don't know the date when that expires. I don't know if any of you do.
Middle of September.
Yeah, it's coming soon. But with the school year starting, there will be a requirement of masks on all the buses. Do you know the date, KT, by I don't know off the top of my head.
I want to say the 13th, but I'm not sure.
That sounds right.
Any other board members who'd like to speak?
Oh my God.
Chris?
I just had another question for Joe this time. And I think I don't know if you guys got to watched the recording for the last meeting. One thing that was really heartening about the last meeting, was that Dr. Zadowski, got to tell us about how excited teachers, were to be teaching this coming year. And they were excited they were going to put kids in different types of learning environments we had last year. They were going to share table space in ways they've done that in a year. The 3 to 6 feet really gave us some options for having kids have a really exceptionally good learning experience this year. And the critical piece in this, of course, is to be able to preserve that hope that we could get kids back to normal and have that classroom look a little bit better than it's looked for a year. It turns out it's masked. So could you explain to the folks a little bit about the types of learning environments that maybe some of the teachers have informed you about and their hopes for this coming year to help put this in a little bit more perspective?
Sure. In talking with our teachers, one of the big concerns they had with the learning environment last year was that we really utilized the entire indoor classroom for desks. We spread those desks out as far as we possibly could, and there wasn't room for the collaboration tables. And they felt that really hurt their ability to provide some of the instruction and some of the learning opportunities for our kids. So with the masks and with moving the desks closer to 3 feet, we felt like we could sacrifice some of that desk distance to create space for collaboration tables in each of the elementary classrooms. And we talked about some other things like reading rugs and things like that, and those are all very important to the learning environment, but we have to determine which things are the most important, and we'll sacrifice some of the desk space to provide those learning opportunities. I will say, excuse me, that if the board does approve the optional masking policy, it's unlikely that we will be providing collaboration tables. We will more than likely, go into space mode in terms of trying to do whatever we can to get to the 6 feet. Because if we get to the 6 feet, there'll be less exclusions, less kids missing school. I still don't think we'll be able to get it in many of our classrooms, but we'll sure try our best.
I'm just gonna tell you, there's 2 statements with a question attached. So,
He's already passed that on. That's his 3rd time.
so, anybody else? Carol?
Just one other, and I share this with the board, here's what I'm struggling with. And I'm most concerned about those 51% of the district kiddos that are under 12. And I say that as a parent whose kids are over 12, who are vaccinated, and I don't say you have to be vaccinated, I believe it works, we're gonna do it at my house. I felt an incredible amount of relief when my kids had completed the vaccine series, right? We were able to do more things with less worry. Those 51% of those kids though in our district don't have that option yet. We're hoping soon, we're hoping in the next few months. So we really are asking parents, on one hand, to be afraid of what many of you have shared about your concerns about masks, that you're afraid of some things. We have other kids, parents, who are afraid that they're gonna get COVID or long COVID, which we know somewhere between 4 and 10% of kids have symptoms that last several weeks or more. It's still early, we're building this ship as it floats. But that's where I'm struggling with all of our discussion tonight. When you're over 12, for the most part, you have the ability to get vaccinated if you so choose and have that extra layer of protection. Under 12, not so much, yet you have to come to school one way or the other, you have to get an education.
Thank you.
Dave, to Carl's point, that's why when we talk as an administrative team, we're not recommending masks for 7 through 12. Because those students do have the opportunity to become vaccinated. And I know a number of those students did become vaccinated because they didn't want to be excluded. And that's a personal choice they can all make. But again, that's why our recommendation is focused on the younger students, and hopefully they will have the opportunity before the end of the fall. Casey, have you heard, Dr. Horvath or Dr. Strong, have any of you heard any more about when vaccinations might be available for the younger kids?
No.
We're good, thanks.
I really think
Please.
that is the crystal ball kind of question. We are hoping that early fall is when that's gonna come through, but it's really hard to say.
Vaccines
Dr.
don't
Sadowski,
even
is there anything
work.
else in the COVID plan that you wanted to cover that we have not gone over tonight? We talked a lot about masks.
Well, I know at this time last year, we were really concerned about our schools closing down, and I'm very relieved that I really don't think that that is our larger concern this year. Is it possible? It is, but, you know, we have pretty high thresholds, you know, KT helped us with those, you know, basically it comes down to if we have more kids out than we have in, then that school's gonna close for a while. And we didn't even really come close to that last year. The other piece would be the exclusions. That's probably the one that I'm more concerned about this year, especially if we don't have the masks. I've already mentioned that a number of times, so I think the exclusions will be higher. So at our elementary schools, if we have a situation where we have 4 weeks where we have 20% of our students out, then we would maybe have to look at closing an elementary school for a period of time. I still think the chance of that happening is fairly remote. But again, we don't know what it's gonna be like having school in session with the Delta variant and no masks.
Any other questions from the board?
I guess I have a question. So you said, what's the number that you predicted as far as exclusions just in September if we do the optional masking?
My guess would be about 1,500 student days. And where it's really a long shot guess. I'm taking it off of last year's numbers.
Right.
And then knowing that if we don't have masks and the kids are closer, it's probably gonna be somewhat similar.
But with masks last year in September, we had 3,000 exclusions, which would be twice as good.
Right.
We've already went through it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The difference there, Mark. You know, if we don't mind, you know, kids missing school for 1,500 days in the month of September, then I don't like masks either. I'm personally not okay with that. You know, some people might be, but what I would say, Mark, is that it wasn't okay last September either. People were mad. I mean, that second meeting in September, people were pretty upset. And we took a lot of calls, a lot of very frustrated parents. And I am worried that we'll have additional frustrations this year if that happens. Especially when it can be prevented. Last year, we were trying to figure this out. This year, we know enough that to me, it just isn't, it's not good planning if we don't use what we learned and try to put a system together that's gonna minimize those exclusions. And some people might choose, you know, they might say that the choice for the mask is more important to them than the potential of their child being excluded, and I get that. But we're trying to make decisions to try to keep kids in school, at least that's my recommendation. But board members, you may feel that the option for masks is more important than that, and I respect that.
Question?
Yeah.
Keep it short.
This is a clarifying question. Correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, but wasn't, the reason why we had such high exclusions in the beginning of September is because we didn't have that 6 foot?
Right.
So that's not really, a one-to-one comparison. If you would like to explain that to Mark? The reason why there were such high exclusions in September is because we were unclear as to the 6 foot rule. Whereas now we are very clear about the 3 to 6 feet, what's gonna happen to students if they're excluded.
Well, we were clear with the rule last September. The difference was we didn't have the desks set up at 6 feet. And actually, we had 6 feet in a number of our classrooms. I want to say it was around maybe 50% of our classrooms. But what we found, especially at the high school, there were a number of classrooms set up where the desks were less than 6 feet. And then there were, you know, large instructional boxes and stuff. And we had to really make some changes there at the high school, especially because you have one case and then you look at the seating chart and it's okay, 1, 2, 3, 4 exclusions. And that was just for that one class. And then in 7-period day, you know, take 7 times 4 and 28. Yeah, 10 days. So it really added up quickly. And again, we made it through. And we'll make it through and we'll innovate and we'll do whatever we can to try to make it through this year. But the difference this year is that because the rules changed, And the reason why it's less is because of the abbreviated quarantine. Last September, we didn't have the abbreviated quarantine, we have that now. So I'm not saying 3,000, I'm saying more like 1,500. But that might not be right. I mean, hopefully this Delta, if it's as transmissible as what it seems like, maybe it'll be out of here by September 1st, we don't know. But what I do know is that if we mask, the number of exclusions should be extremely low, like very low.
Joe, question? You made me think of this, the 7-period day. High school has gone back away from the block, is that block period, right? So last year we had block periods, this year we would have more classroom movement.
Yes. The other thing with the plan is I'm not planning on doing weekly COVID updates. We felt they were necessary last year. We will have a dashboard on our website. So if someone wants to see what the case levels are in our school district, we'll update that dashboard weekly. I will still communicate as needed with families, but that weekly COVID update, I'm not gonna miss that. I'm sure many of you won't either.
Dr. Horvath?
Thank you. I know I'm not a board member, and this may not be my place, but just a clarifying question that I hope will help. That 1,500 number that Dr. Zdowski mentioned, is that exclusions due to exposure, or does that include symptomatic folks as well?
That would have been both.
The reason I ask the question is my colleagues and I have seen significantly less influenza and other respiratory viruses over the course of the last year, presumably because of the mitigation strategies that are in place for COVID.
And that brings up another good point. We are planning on having testing available in our school district. It would not be mandatory. We're not looking at surveillance testing or screening testing or anything like that. But we are looking to be able to provide testing available for families who want to test. And the reason why is because on the abbreviated quarantine, in order to come back early, you have to have a negative test. And we realize, especially if the National Guard is not going to have their testing, if so, my understanding is Stealth's not going to have community testing this year. So really, people would have to make an appointment and have to go to one of the medical facilities, which is a significant barrier for many of our families. So I know our school nurse finally got contacted today. It's not going to cost our district, anything in terms of having the program. It's a funded program, but that is something that's part of our plan. We are planning to offer that for the people who want it.
And the reason I bring that up is not to advocate or dissuade people from testing. It's simply to note that we're seeing fewer symptomatic people, whether it's from COVID or something else. And all of those symptomatic people would be excluded because they're symptomatic.
And that's one of the concerns, and I don't know if everyone understood that, but essentially, last year, we didn't have many times when kids woke up with, runny nose and, two of the symptoms, sore throat, runny nose, whatever it is. But even this summer, we're seeing more of that for whatever reason it may be. So if a student has those two symptoms, especially a younger student where they're sneezing and coughing and stuff, they're gonna be excluded. And that's gonna add up as well.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor, with a second. Motion is to approve the COVID-19 plan for the district, which would make masking optional, grades 4K through 12. Would have the contact tracing done by the health department, in grades 4K through 12. Any other discussion before we vote? Okay, Janet? Just to remind everybody, a yes vote would be to approve it with option A, optional masking, grades 4K through 12, contact tracing done by the health department, grades 4K through 12. Charlie?
The remainder of the plan as presented to us in our board docs will stay the same,
Yep.
with the exception of the option that, the motion that's on the table.
Correct. Everybody clear? So a yes vote would be to approve it with plan A, a no vote would be to not approve it. Okay, Janet?
Tina, mine was open, then it went away.
Mine came back.
Yeah, every year.
It should be back.
Okay. Yeah, I just shut down.
You have everybody?
I can do a voice, but if you want, but literally, it just shut down all night.
Go ahead, Chris.
No.
Motion passes by a 5-4 vote. I want to thank everybody that came out tonight, whether you're for or against. And I want to assure parents and families on both sides of the district, no matter the outcome of it, we're going to work to do what we can to keep our kids safe in the district and to move forward. So that is the goal of all of us.
Thank you.
The next agenda item, item 4B, action to approve the employee handbook updates for 2021, 2022. We did discuss this at our last meeting. Any changes, so? Any questions, board members? Okay, Janet? I'm sorry. Okay.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Okay, let's start that over again. Item 4B, action to approve employee handbook updates for 2021, 2022. Motion to approve. Chris, is there a second? Mark, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? As I stated, we did talk about this at our last meeting. No changes have been made since then. Okay, let's go. Motion passes by unanimous vote 9-0. Action item 4C, we're gonna do by a voice vote. This is to approve minutes from our last meeting. Can you look quick? So the minutes from our special board meeting of July 26, 2021. Motion to approve. Amy, is there a second? Chris? Any questions? Okay, Kenna?
Hey, Chris,
Yes.
Mark,
Restroom.
Tanya,
Abstain.
Clint,
Yeah.
Carl,
Yes.
Amy,
Yes.
Charlie,
Yeah.
Angie,
Yes.
David.
Yes. Motion passes by a vote of 7-0 with one abstention. Okay, moving on to discussion items. Item 5A, legal services report. Dr. Zadowski?
Yeah, Leah had to leave, but she sent the report over to all the board members. Hopefully you've had a chance to review it. You can notice that the legal expenditures for last year were quite a bit less than they had been. We attribute that to no student expulsions, also fewer issues in terms of employment law and matters such as that. So hopefully that'll continue. But that's the report. Any questions?
Any questions from board members on that? So, a little over $7,000 last year spent on legal services.
I'd like to look at it as 33,000 under budget.
No questions? Okay, item 5B, review items for the annual meeting. And Tanya, I'll let you, if you want to just address this.
Sure, I don't have a lot to say, I just know we had quite a few new members, so the annual meeting is coming up, and I think we can do a better job of at least sharing what it looks like for our new board members. So, Dave, I included the different links for what is covered and not covered, but maybe you can share some background knowledge on who makes motions and is there time limits for speakers, or just give a snapshot of what the evening looks like.
Thanks, Tanya.
No problem.
So the annual meeting is August 23rd. It'll be at the high school. I believe I'm not sure, Tiered Lecture Hall or what? Tiered Lecture Hall. So we will have a board meeting prior to that at 5 o'clock at the high school. There are 2 documents here that are attached. The one I found most useful was the first one. Talks about things that board members can do. So obviously, I'll just run through them briefly, okay? There's a bunch, but I'll try to be brief.
And Dave, just sorry to interrupt, but this is not just board members, this is
Yes,
the
this
electors.
is for anybody in the district that would like to come to the annual meeting. And there's some things they have the power to do, some things that they don't, but this year I'll explain a little bit about what they can and can't do. So the first thing we'll do is nominate or elect a chairperson and the clerk to run the meeting. Typically, the board president runs the meeting. Not always, but in this is my 9th year. Everyone I've been to, the board president has run the meeting.
You have to be nominated though.
Yep.
Let's just say that, okay?
Yep.
I nominate Dave.
Well, you don't know.
Save that for 2 weeks.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I should clarify. Yeah, I'm just gonna run through stuff. We'll actually do the motions and that at the meeting. One of the things that can come up is the salaries of school board members. We did have a vote several years ago from the floor to increase board member salary. At the time, it was, I think, $800 for president, $600 for the rest of the board. And I think they raised it to $1,000 for president and $800 for the rest of the board. And that was done at the annual meeting, a motion from the floor to do that. Also, reimbursement of school board members for expenses. Some board members do have expenses. So that's something that we talked about and voted on. Building sites, if somebody wishes the district to, buy more land and do things like that, that's something that can be brought up. Also, real estate, taxes for the sites, maintenance and buildings, tax for transportation vehicles, taxes for operation, tax for debt, school debt service fund, school capital expansion fund, tax for recreation authority, legal proceedings, textbooks, school lunches, and consolidation of high schools, which doesn't include us because we're not a union district. Anything, Joel, that you want to elaborate on here?
Well, I will say that we try to make it as, I don't want to use the word easy, but we want to make it as streamlined as possible for the electors that come to the meeting. And the board approved the agenda for the annual meeting, and I'm actually having a difficult time finding it, and I think it was in either beginning of June. Oh, it's July 12th, thanks Janet, you're right on top of that. I tell you, the month of July is all blending together. But if you look at the board docs from July 12th, just pulling it up here. If I can find it. Wasn't it on the consent agenda? I believe. Yep, there it is. So then if you go to the board docs background from July 12th in the consent agenda, it has the meeting agenda, and then right in the agenda, it has the recommended motions. And that's one thing I would say that the annual meeting seems to go a lot better when there is participation. And we do have some electors in our district that have been to annual meetings before and they will speak up and make motions. But a lot of times it's a good opportunity for school board members as well, just because you are in the district twice a month and you're very aware of district operations. Having those motions can keep that meeting moving and keep it going efficiently. So if you look at that agenda, we do have a budget presentation. Leah Theater and I will give kind of a summary of last year and then also a summary of the budget for this year. It's a little bit frustrating because we're required to have this annual meeting, but we have it at a time prior to when we have a lot of information we need for the final budget. And then, as you know, as school board members in October, the authority to set the actual tax levy is in October. And that all changed when revenue limits came in and stuff. So you used to be able to have a lot more authority at the annual meeting, and electors could come in and really change things. But the way the state law has changed since the early 90s, most of that power has been put back to the school board. So you can read more about that if you want to, but there's 3 resolutions in terms of adopting the tax levy and the annual compensation, like Dave said, and then the reimbursement of travel. So those things are important duties at the annual meeting. But then ultimately, the final tax levy will be set after we get all the information from the state and the board reviews that at the end of October.
Just a question, just so I'm clear, the language is may, district may, not district must.
Correct.
So it mentions real estate, so if, somebody next to Oak Lawn has 40 feet of land they want to sell, does it have to come to this annual meeting, or can we deal with that at a normal board meeting?
You can't deal with it at a normal board meeting, but you can have a special meeting of the electors. And that's what often happens, Carl, because the timing of these things doesn't often align with when the annual meeting is held. But then you have to put special notice out and have a separate special meeting for the electors, which oftentimes is the board and maybe a few people who attend board meetings regularly, unless it's an item of high interest.
That makes sense, thank you. And thank you, Tanya, for getting this on, because this helps me out as a person, so I appreciate it.
Amy?
I would just like to say it's not very well attended from the public. And so since we've got some crowd here, you want to come to the annual meeting, and as much as you came out tonight, that would be great. You learn lots more about our budget and what we do as a district, other than trying to decide on masks or not. So I'm going to just invite you, my own personal invitation to that. And also I would hope that our administration would make sure that it gets published in the paper and other places so that people are aware that this meeting is happening on the 23rd. Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel. Any other board members? Angie?
I read through one of the documents that was attached, and I might have missed this. So there were some recommendations. There was something that said, should a time limit be set for discussion? Is there something like that at the annual meeting, like we have during our regular board meetings?
Typically, we have not in the past. The current time limit that we have was set for meetings, for board meetings. In my opinion, I guess it doesn't really fall under the annual meeting, but we've never had an annual meeting with a ton of discussion, to be honest. It's usually been pretty short and sweet. But
It also said, may a person speak more than once on the same subject? Should an order of speakers be established so that equal time is given to both sides? And so I'm just wondering.
I guess if that's something that any board member is concerned about, if they would want to make a motion at the annual meeting.
Yeah, ultimately, the rules for the annual meeting would be set at the annual meeting. Like Dave said, typically that hasn't been needed, but at the onset of the meeting or even during the meeting, rules could be established.
And that's just would everybody at the annual meeting vote on those rules then? So
Do we use ballots, or is it a way?
typically we use paper ballots. Unless it's something simple like approving the minutes.
Yeah, I actually don't think we've had to use paper ballots on many items, because usually there's a pretty good consensus. And especially like setting the tax levy, because like I said, the board actually has the authority. Usually there's not much of a discrepancy.
Yeah, I think I remember on the board salary issue, I think they checked a show of hands on that one.
I think so.
So I stand corrected. Amy?
Also, just so you know, that usually at the end, after all the business taken care of, and the budget's been presented and all the milestones of our school district and so forth, usually the time for the public to speak. Anyone who wants to speak about anything, it doesn't have to be on the agenda, it could be anything, you don't have to be answered or anything, they can ask questions and.
Yes, correct. And we also do recognition of directors, board members that are on the board. Any other questions? Thanks, Tanya, for putting that on. Okay, item 5C, review items related to next meeting date, board committees and reports. As I said, our next meeting is the 23rd. It will be at the high school at 5:00 p.m. It'll be a short agenda for that meeting, be followed by our annual meeting at 6:00 at the high school tiered lecture hall. That'll be our annual meeting. And then our first day of school, September 1st, is shortly after that, so. I want to thank everybody for coming out. Charlie?
I'd just like to remind everybody of, that maybe the vote tonight didn't go the way that they thought. Remind everybody of Exhibit 165. So just, you might want to review that as we start to get questions from folks and start to respond to folks that, I'll just read it. Once a decision has been made by the board, members agree to support the decision. Individual board members may have the right to disagree, but once a decision has been made, we agree to support the district implementation. So, just a reminder.
Thank you. With that, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn. Chris, beat you. Amy, second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thanks, Clint.
Yep, have a good night.
We stand adjourned.